Greetings, folks, and welcome back to Not Funny Guys Presents Red Dwarf Rewatch. We have finally made it to Series 2, and today we're kicking it off with Episode 1, Kryten. Directed by our usual Ed By, written by Rob Grant and Doug Naylor, and this one released on September 6, 1988. If you remember, we left off Series 1, we were just in March. This is one of my favorite things about British series. They tend to record one in the spring, and then one in the fall. So you get, like, good sci-fi, good British series telling, I guess you might call it. But let's not digress too much. So moving on to a summary. So sort of the summary, we have Red Dwarf intercepts an SOS distress call from the American space cruiser Nova 5, which has crashed on an asteroid. Much to their disappointment, the crew, who are expected to find these female crew members and damsels in distress, find only the survivor, Kryten, played by David Ross, a service mechanoid with an overactive guilt chip. Lister eventually helps teaches Kryten to be rebellious, whilst Rimmer wants to abuse Kryten's servility. This is interesting primarily because eventually there will be another gentleman, I can't remember his name, I will look it up, who will come to play Kryten eventually, and rather than being rebellious as he is in this one, they play a more slow burn effect with him, and I think he's a very good addition to the crew that we will eventually have. I think it comes Series 3. I'll double check that and get back to you guys as well, but my bad. So we still have the SOSs. This one time it's a godless universe, but you have to laugh at it. Thanks, Holly. So we meet our future friend Kryten. He's on the abandoned crashed ship. He's watching a soap opera called Androids. Back on Red Dwarf, Rimmer is trying to take an Esperanto test. He is trying to bulk up on his Esperanto. Well, it's just fascinating because these are the same tapes I think he listened to in his sleep, and of course, Lister actually knows the stuff, whereas Rimmer still can't quite get the hang of it. And apparently, this has been going on. He's been doing this for 8 years, and he still sucks at the language. They end up talking about books and how Lister doesn't read. And then he says he does read, and he said, yes, but the little Dick and Jane books don't count. Lister then admits he went to art college, but he failed his exams like anybody else. He failed his exams, and then he applied. It's apparently how you get into art school. Because Rimmer doesn't believe him. And then, of course, he dropped out 97 minutes in. Apparently, he found out they were noon lectures, and he just couldn't handle it. While this is going on, Lister is polishing his little bike that he zooms around the ship in now. Holly, of course, interrupts this whole thing. He interrupts their whole little back and forth, and to tell them he's devised a new musical system based on the decibel, and they will have 2 new notes, H and J, and he's going to call it Hall Rock. But he does have news, actually. Signal from a ship, a distress call. Rimmer jumps to this. He thinks it's aliens. And I always love Rimmer for that. He always thinks it's aliens. And Lister always calls him out for it. They basically run into the cat while who's hunting for mice while they're on their way to the comms room. They find out it's an Earth ship. While they're learning about this, we find out Lister's drinking something that has milk in it, and apparently they run out of supplies, which is what Holly's like hoping they have more of. And he's like, we've run out of hot milk. What am I drinking? And it's not cow's milk. It's not dehydrated cow's milk. It's not goat's milk. It's dog's milk, which apparently tastes exactly the same, whether it is fresh or expired. So it kind of ruins Lister's day, despite his sloviness. So they hear a message from Kryten. The male officers are dead, and 3 beautiful but wounded officers, Jane, Tracy, and Anne. Rimmer, now wanting to be noted, calling himself Captain A.J. Rimmer, is his sort of brave title, and he's going to come and rescue the day. And so they're 24 hours away, and so they all start prepping. Cat goes to prep himself. Everyone else starts to freshen up. Lister, of course, still being disgusting. He's like literally having to deodorize his socks, hammer them. He then spray paints a hole in his pants. And of course, Rimmer then walks in like a full dress uniform we last saw him in Me Too in. He wants to go by his nickname from school, for which Lister guesses Bonehead, and Rimmer is very offended he actually guessed the right name. But apparently he wants to go by his other one that nobody called him, called Ace. And all this prep for the ladies is a little overblown. But then, um, of course, we have this alternate version. We'll have another person play Kryten later, and we find out back on the ship that the women are all skeletons. So, yeah. Of course, Cat shows up in his full gold space suit, and Holly is even wearing a toupee. They're still out dressed to impress. Rimmer is stuffing his pants, apparently, with extra socks. They get on board. They're shocked to reveal that, of course, these women are not alive. Kryten is just completely oblivious. And then all of a sudden, when he leaves the room and comes back in, they tell him they're dead. After Lister pretends that this is the moment to tell the girls all these great things about Rimmer that he was never going to tell anybody. He reveals they're dead. He's like in denial. He's like, "Are you sure?" And then, of course, they offer to take Kryten back to their ship, where Rimmer basically puts him to use of his programming, which is to serve. And there's a montage of him doing all this cleaning. He sprucens up their quarter. In fact, Lister comes back to their quarters to find out that he's turned it into like this weird kind of English cottage style thing. It's not for me. It looks like something out of some like old grandmother's house, or I don't know. Sorry to grandmothers there. And of course, his clothes have been washed, and his boxers can move. So, but then he has this whole conversation where he tries to talk to Kryten about, living his own life, and that's hard for Kryten to come to the idea because he's so used to being a servant. It's in his programming, but apparently he reveals that whole android show is one of his guilty pleasures. And apparently, at some point in the in-between we see him, Lister took him to watch Marlon Brando's Rebel Without a Cause, James Dean, tried to like really inhabit in him this sense of being your own man, which it appears that it has not taken, because then we come back to Rimmer sitting for his portrait while Lister is mad at Kryten because he won't, do it. In fact, he even calls him that a polite name at one point when he let him off was to call Rimmer an a-hole. But then when he seems to be ignoring all this advice, Rimmer gets up to come look at his painting that Kryten's been doing, and it's him in his dressing room sitting on a toilet. And we now see that apparently Kryten has taken in all the rebellious streak stuff that Lister was trying to get him into. And then the last time we see him for now, he borrows Lister's bike. He's dressed in like biker gear like he's doing Marlon Brando, and we get this kind of freeze shot of him before we cut to the credits. So interesting start for season 2. It's funny because they kind of speed run this evolution of Kryten. They're going to kind of walk this back later, because we will then see when we get Kryten as a full member of the crew, he will be going through a more gradual evolution of this. They kind of like sped run this episode as like a proof of concept. So I'm a big fan when we bring Llewellyn, I believe is the gentleman who plays him when he brings him back. Good Welsh name. We will see him again. He will become a more permanent part of the crew later, but we'll talk about that again when we come back. Now, next time, we will be diving into episode 2, Better Than Life. Now, this is a fun one. I've actually already watched this one. Thanks for the memory. Sorry, I watched episode 3. Thanks for the memory. I accidentally got ahead of myself at one point. We'll be doing Better Than Life next time. So keep an eye out for that. I hope to have that one up later this week. Try to get back onto a more regular posting schedule. In the meantime, keep in mind, Not Funny Guys, we've got a lot of other stuff. We've got our Off the Reels, the main podcast. You can find that we've covered so far for our summer comic book movies. We've done The Rocketeer. We did Superman. We just did Spawn from 1997, going down nostalgia lane. And I just saw Fantastic Four, so we'll be covering that along with the rest of the gang this week, so that will come out next week. We also had the Thinking About Thinking podcast, where you can find me and Dr. Kryten talking about all kinds of things that we are thinking about. And you can also find Casey and Eric over on the Wrestling with the Horror of It All, where they talk about horror movies and professional wrestling. So we got a little bit of flavor for everybody. Keep an eye out for that. Please look in the description below for all of our links if you want to write us, but also please feel free to subscribe, like, comment on these videos, share them, and I will see you next time. So until then, keep it not funny. I'll get that right one day.